The milk was already going sour when Delia heard the wagon. She didn't move right away. She had learned not to in the 14 months since Thomas died, because sounds that came up the road at that hour usually meant something she'd have to deal with alone. And sometimes it was better to let a thing announce itself fully before you committed your body to responding to it. She stood at the kitchen window with the cloth still in her hand, the one she'd been using to wipe down the counter that didn't need wiping, and she watched the shape of a man come around the bend of cottonwoods that lined the east side of the property. He was on foot. That was the first thing. The second thing was that he was leading the horse rather than riding it, and the horse was listing to one side in a way that meant something was wrong with its left foreleg. The man moved slow, not from exhaustion exactly, more like somebody who had decided a long time ago that hurrying didn't change much. Delia set the cloth down. She did not reach for the shotgun Thomas had left hanging by the door, because she'd taken down 3 months ago when she realized she'd been reaching for it reflexively every time a sparrow landed wrong on the fence post, and that was no kind of life. She'd put it on the bed instead. It was still there. She knew where it was, but she didn't go get it. She went to the door and opened it. The man's name, as he gave it, was Earl Cutter. He said it the way men said their names when they weren't certain how it would land. Not with shame exactly, but with a kind of careful flatness, like setting something fragile on a surface you aren't sure will hold it. "I'm not looking for charity," he said. He was standing about 20 feet back from the porch, which she noticed he hadn't come up close. Horse threw a shoe somewhere around the creek crossing, and I think she's pulled something in the ankle joint. I just need a place to let her stand still for a day. Maybe 2. There's a barn behind you. "I know where my barn is," Delia said. He stopped. "Sorry," he said. That was "Yes, ma'am." She looked at the horse. The animal was a bay mare, older, with a white diamond on her forehead and an expression of resigned tolerance that Delia had seen on a lot of things in this part Kansas. The horse was not in acute distress. She was bearing weight on the bad leg, just less of it, and her ears were doing that slow sideways rotation that meant discomfort rather than panic. "What's her name?" Delia said. "Claire." "Mm." She stepped down off the porch. Not toward him, toward the horse. "How long ago did she pull it?" "Yesterday morning. We kept on too long before I stopped. That's on me." Delia ran her hand down the mare's leg from a knee, and the horse flinched slightly at the fetlock, but didn't try to move away. Not bad. Swollen, but not hot. She straightened up and looked at Earl Cutter for the first time, without the porch between them. He was somewhere in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, the kind of face that had started out good-looking, and then been rearranged by weather and probably a few other things. He had gray in his beard that wasn't there yet in his hair. He was watching her examine the horse with an expression that was trying very hard not to be grateful before there was anything to be grateful about. "There's a corral on the east side of the barn," she said. "Smaller one. Put her in there. There's water. I'll bring down some liniment." She turned and went back to the house. He didn't ask to sleep in the barn the first night. He made a camp at the edge of the property, back past the fence line, in a little hollow of grass where the land dipped before it flattened out again toward the road. She could see the small orange point of his fire from the kitchen window after dark. She stood and looked at it for a while, and then she stopped looking at it and went to bed. In the morning, she brought down liniment and clean strips of cloth for wrapping, and she half expected him to be gone, or be in a different place than she'd left him. She wasn't sure which outcome she was hoping for. But he was in a small corral with Claire, talking to her in a low voice about something Delia couldn't hear, and the horse was listening the way horses do when they're being talked to by somebody they trust. He heard Delia coming and straightened up. He had already cleaned the mare's hose that morning and refilled the water trough from somewhere, the creek, she supposed, with the bucket she kept in the barn, and she noticed this without commenting on it. "I can do that myself," he said, when she handed him the liniment. "I know you can," she said, and went back up to the house. There was bread dough that needed to be punched down. Then there was a fence on the north side that one of the Hensley boys was supposed to come fix but hadn't, and probably wouldn't, because the Hensley boys had been promising to fix things for her since before Thomas was in the ground, and so far they had fixed exactly nothing. She'd started doing the fences herself 2 months ago. She wasn't good at it yet. She was getting there. She spent the morning at the north fence, and around noon she heard hammering from the direction of the barn. She didn't go look right away. She finished the section she was working on, 3 posts, set them as plumb as she could manage, tamped them. Then she walked down toward the barn. Earl Cutter was repairing the hinge on the barn door. The big door on the right side had been listing off its hinge since February, and she hadn't gotten to it. He was using tools from somewhere. He'd had a roll of tools in his saddlebag, she supposed, or maybe found some of Thomas's in the barn. He worked without looking up when she came close. "I didn't ask for that," she said. "No, ma'am. I'm not paying for it." "Didn't figure you were." He tightened something. The door swung clean. He looked at it for a second like he was confirming a small private belief. That hinge was just asking for it. Would have come all the way off in another month. Delia looked at the door, swung it once herself. "I know," she said. "The second night, he slept in the barn." She'd told him he could, but only in a way that made it sound like it was about practicality. She'd said she didn't want him walking down from that Camp Hollow every morning to tend the horse. Said it was wasteful. She said this without looking at him while she said it. He said, "I appreciate it." She said, "It's the practical thing." He didn't say anything after that. She woke up at 3 in the morning to a sound she couldn't place and lay there listening and eventually understood it was him coughing. Out in the barn, a hard chest cough that stopped and started and then stopped for a while. She lay and listened to it stop. Then she lay in the quiet after it. She didn't take him anything. She thought about it. She lay there and thought about the cough and about the small orange fire at the edge of her property the night before, and about the way he'd said Claire's name when she asked it. Just a name, not a story about the horse. Not an explanation of where he'd gotten her or how long he'd had her. Just Claire. Like the answer to that question was so obvious it barely needed saying. She didn't take him anything. In the morning, she made coffee, and when he came up to check on something in the small garden she had going behind the house, she handed him a cup without being asked, and he took it, and they stood there in the cold of the morning and drank coffee. And that was about as much as either of them had to say. There are people you can trust in silence. Most people you can't. Not really. The silence with most people fills up immediately with what they want from you, or what they're afraid of, or what they're not saying. Real quiet is rarer than people know. I'm not sure why I'm telling you that. I suppose I'm telling you because it matters to this story, or to understanding the particular strangeness of what happened next. On the 3rd day, Delia found the pocket watch. She was doing the liniment herself that morning because Earl had gone up to the creek for something, and she was working the cloth around the mare's swollen ankle, slow and circular, the way you do when the animal needs to feel the whole contact of your hand, and not just the pressure fingers. Claire dropped her head and sighed, the way horses do, and Delia looked down at the straw and saw it. It was tucked against the base of the stall post, partially covered by straw, like it had been placed there deliberately or like it had fallen out of a pocket and rolled. She picked it up. Gold casing, or something that had once been gold, worn to a dull shine. The cover was dented on one side, and the hinge was broken, which meant the cover had been bent open and pried back more than once, and the hinge had finally given way. Inside the case, where photographs sometimes was, there was nothing. The photograph had been removed, or maybe there had never been one. The face of the watch was cracked, a single diagonal crack from about 8 o'clock to about 2 o'clock, but the hands were still there, frozen at 11:17. She turned it over. On the back was an engraving. Old, the letters worn almost flat. She had to angle it toward the light from the stall slat to read it. For what it's worth, M. She stood there with the watch in her hand. She said exactly where she'd found it, against the base of the stall post, under the straw. She finished wrapping Claire's ankle and went back to the house. Earl Cutter didn't talk about himself. This was not the silence of somebody with something to hide, or maybe it was she didn't know, but it didn't feel like hiding. It felt more like somebody who had given up believing that the facts of life added up to a thing worth recounting. She understood this. She had been giving Thomas's facts to people for 14 months. What he was, what he'd done, how he died, cardiac. The doctor said sudden, which meant that one afternoon he was digging a drainage channel in the field, and the next morning she found it with his face in the dirt and his hand still loosely holding the shovel handle, as if he'd just set it down to rest for a moment. People wanted to know what his last words were. She'd told them she didn't know because she wasn't there, and they looked at her like that was the saddest part. But the saddest part for Delia was not that she didn't know his last words. It was that she couldn't remember what they'd said to each other at breakfast that morning. Normal things. Probably about the drainage. Probably she'd handed him bread, and he'd said something about the weather or about a tool he needed. She could not remember. That was what she carried. On the fourth day, the swelling in Claire's ankle had come down enough that Earl walked her slowly in a circle in the corral, watching how she placed a foot. He did this for about 20 minutes. Patient. Never pulling her, just walking beside her like he was accompanying her rather than testing her. When he stopped, Delia happened to be nearby, leaning on the fence. "Another day," he said. Maybe to her, maybe to himself. "I'm not asking you to go," she said. She said it to the fence post. He looked over. She didn't look back. After a moment, he turned back to Claire and ran a hand along the horse's neck, long and slow. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking to stay." "I know," she said. They stood there like that for a while. He fixed 3 more things without being asked. The pump handle that had been stiff since March. He found a part for it somewhere. She didn't ask where. A section of the hen house roof that had been letting in light on one side. The gate latch on the main pasture gate, which had been catching and sticking, and which she'd been lifting and jerking open every day so long she'd stopped noticing she was doing it. The gate swung easy now, and the first time she opened it without having to fight it, she stopped walking for a second. She didn't say anything to him about it. He didn't seem to want anything said. But that evening she made enough supper for 2, and she didn't ask him. She just left a plate at the barn door on a clean cloth, because the alternative was throwing away the extra, and she was not a woman who threw away good food. She went back inside. She stood at the kitchen window. After a few minutes his shape appeared in the barn doorway, and he looked at the plate, and then he looked up toward the house, and she stepped back from the window a little. He picked up the plate and went back in. She ate her own supper. Outside the window the dark came up from the east the way it does in Kansas, gradually and then all at once, and the stars appeared in that hard bright way they do when the air is clear and cold and there's nothing between you and the sky. The 5th morning she woke up and lay in bed and felt something she could not entirely name. Not comfort. Exactly, and not the opposite of comfort. Something in between. An awareness, maybe, that the property was not empty, that there was breath in the barn beside the animals. She had not felt that in 14 months, and she had not realized how much she had been compensating for it until it was there again. Thomas had been a morning person. He was up before her, always, had the fire going, and was usually already outside by the time she came down. She had adjusted her mornings to his mornings being visible from the window. She'd drink her coffee and look out, and there he'd be, moving around in the yard with that methodical purposefulness he had, checking on things, always just checking on things, like a man who never quite trusted the world to hold together, without his attention. Earl Cutter was already at the corral when she came down. She could see him from the window. He was doing the same thing, just checking, walking slow along the fence line, pausing, checking. His hands were in his pockets, which was different. Thomas kept his hands out, but the looking was the same. She stood at the window longer than she meant to. Then she made coffee and went about her morning, and did not let herself think about what she'd noticed. She gathered over the days, been many things, not from what he said, from small pieces. The tools he knew how to use suggested one thing. The way he talked to the horse suggested another. He knew something about irrigation. He'd looked at her drainage situation on the east field one afternoon without comment, but with an expression she recognized as the expression of someone performing involuntary calculations. He noticed when a nail was starting to work itself loose. He noticed when the sky meant rain. On the 6th day it rained. He came up to the porch because there was nowhere else really to go. The barn roof had a section that leaked badly, which he'd pointed out to her 2 days ago, and she'd said she knew about it. And she was sitting on the porch already when the rain started, in the chair on the right side, because the chair on the left side had been Thomas's, and she hadn't sat in it since and wasn't going to. He stood at the porch steps, not entirely under the roof, one shoulder getting wet. "You can come up," she said. He came up 2 steps and leaned against the post. That was as far as he went. They listened to the rain. After a long while he said, "This is good rain." "Yes," she said. More rain. A clap of far thunder, low and long. "Does it rain like this much around here?" he said. "Used to," she said. "Less than it did." He nodded like this was information he'd expected. "Where are you coming from?" she said, and she said the way you ask something when you've been not asking it for several days. He was quiet enough that she thought maybe he wasn't going to answer, and she was already preparing herself to be fine with that. And then he said, "Oklahoma Territory." Before that, Missouri. Before that, further back than I usually say. "Where are you going?" Another pause, but different from the first one. The first one was a man deciding what to say. This one was something else. "I had some thought of Colorado," he said. "Brother out there. Or had one." He stopped. "I haven't written him in a while. Long while. I don't know if I'm going to Colorado or if I've just been saying Colorado because I needed somewhere to be going." Delia looked at the rain. "I understand that," she said. She told him about the letter that night. She didn't plan to. They'd come inside out of the rain and she put coffee on and they were sitting at the kitchen table, not close together. Him on the far side, the table between them, and she'd been looking at the shelf near the window where she kept things. A small jar of dried lavender, a tin of buttons, a folded piece of paper that had been there so long she had stopped seeing it. She looked at it and then she heard herself say, "Thomas wrote me a letter once. When we were courting. He wasn't a writing man. It was the only one he ever wrote. He said in it," she stopped. She picked up her coffee cup. "He said things that he never said out loud the rest of our life. I don't know if he forgot he'd said them in the letter, or if he figured once was enough, or if it scared him to have said them and he just..." She didn't finish the sentence. Earl Cutter looked at his coffee cup. "I wrote a letter once that I didn't send," he said. "Carried it for 2 years. Then I burned it." He paused. "Still know every word of it." Delia looked at the folded paper on the shelf. "Some things are like that," she said. "Yeah," he said. Claire's ankle was healed enough by the 7th morning that Earl walked her a longer circuit, out to the road and back, watching her gait. And when he came back into the main gate, the gate that swung easy now, he had the look of a man who had run out of reasons to stay and wasn't sure how he felt about that. Delia was in the garden, not doing anything in particular in it, just being in it, which she did sometimes. She had seeds from the seed catalog she'd ordered in February, before Thomas died, back when she was planting a garden for 2, and she still hadn't quite reconciled the size of what she'd ordered to the size of what she needed now. "She's moving well," Earl said. "Good," Delia said. "I could probably head out tomorrow. Give her one more night." "You could," Delia said. She was looking at a row of bean plants that were coming up too close together and needed to be thinned, which was a job she found particularly thankless because you pulled up perfectly good plants to let the others live, which seemed to her like a harsh way to run a garden, even if it was necessary. She thinned 3 bean plants, tossed them aside. "Or the day after," Earl said. She looked up at him. He was looking off past the barn toward the east field, the one with the drainage problem. "I could take a look at that drainage situation before I go," he said, "if you wanted." She looked back at the beans. "I'm not asking much," he said. And then he stopped, and his expression shifted slightly, like he'd surprised himself. He tried again. "I just mean, I'm not looking for..." He stopped again. "I don't know how to say what I mean." "I know what you mean," Delia said. She didn't look at him when she said it. He didn't say anything. She thinned 2 more bean plants, and somewhere in the doing of that she said, "Stay through the drainage, then, if you want." The work on the drainage took 3 days. Earl dug, mostly, which was hard work in ground that had dried hard and then been re-wet by the rain, and was now somewhere between workable and obstinate. He dug with Thomas's long-handled spade, the one Delia hadn't touched since she'd found Thomas the way she found him, and she registered the fact of this, Earl using that spade, and filed it somewhere that she would look at later, or maybe wouldn't. She helped with the parts that needed 2 people. They worked without talking most of the time, which she had found over the past 7 days was normal for them, and not uncomfortable. In the evening, she made supper for 2, and he came to the kitchen door, and she let him in, and they ate, and he did the washing up without being told, and then he went back to the barn. On the second evening of the drainage work, he stayed a little longer at the table. She put out the last of a canned peach preserve over some bread, and he'd eaten it with more attention than a person gives food they're just getting through. She noticed this, and then pretended not to have noticed it. "You're a good cook," he said. Not as a compliment exactly. More like an observation he'd been sitting on. "My mother was," she said. Mine couldn't cook to save her, he said. He said it with a mild fondness, like a fact about weather. We ate a lot of things that were technically edible. Delia laughed. It was a short laugh, more sound than feeling at first, and then the feeling came just behind it, small and unexpected. She hadn't laughed in. She couldn't remember. She looked down at the table. Earl looked at the window. Neither of them said anything about the laugh, which was exactly the right thing to do. The drainage was finished on the afternoon of the third day. They stood at the edge of the field and looked at it, the channel running clean along the low side, shored up where it needed shoring. If it rained good, it would do what it was supposed to do now. That'll hold, Earl said. Yes, she said. They walked back up toward the house and the barn. At the point where the paths diverged, the one to the house, the one to the barn, they stopped, which happened naturally, without planning, just the geometry of where they were and where they each needed to go. I should probably go in the morning, he said. Probably, she said. She looked at the house. He looked at the barn. I found your watch, she said. In the stall. I put it back where I found it. He didn't say anything. I didn't read the engraving, she said, which was a lie, but a kind one. Thank you, he said. She wasn't sure if he was thanking her for putting it back or for not reading it. It's nothing, she said. She didn't sleep well. This was not unusual. She didn't sleep well most nights. But this was a different kind of not sleeping. She lay and listened to Barn, and the barn was quiet. He was sleeping, or at least not coughing tonight, and the quiet should have been restful and wasn't. She thought about the drainage and about the gate latch and about the barn hinge and about the supper dishes he had always done without being asked. She thought about these things not as a list of things he had done, but as a question she didn't know how to ask. She thought about Thomas and what Thomas would think, and then she made herself stop that, because Thomas was gone, and the question of what Thomas would think was one she had no business pursuing, because she would never know, and because there was a way in which asking it was its own kind of unfairness. She thought about Colorado. The brother Earl wasn't sure was still there. The letter he'd written and burned and still knew every word of. Around 2 a.m, she got up and went to the shelf and took down the folded paper. Thomas's letter, the only one. She didn't open it. She held it for a while. Then she put it back. He was saddling Claire in the morning when she came down. She stood at the kitchen window and watched him do it, the efficient practice motions of a man who had done this 1,000 times, checking the girth, adjusting the saddle blanket where it had bunched on the left side. Claire turned her head to watch him and then looked away, indifferent. Delia made coffee. Made it for 2, because that was what she'd been doing. She heard him at the kitchen door, and she said, "Come in," before he knocked, which surprised him. She could tell by the pause. He came in, and she handed him a cup, and they stood in the kitchen in the early light and drank coffee. Outside the window, the sun was starting up behind the cottonwoods, making long shadows across the yard, and the chickens had started their morning sounds. "You have a good place here," he said. "It needs work," she said. "Good places always do." She put her cup down on the counter, looked at the yard, looked at the long shadows. "You don't have to go today," she said. She said it to the window. He was quiet behind her. "I'm not asking much," she said, and she felt the echo of his words in it. The same ones back to him. "Just stay long enough to rest, is all." The kitchen was very quiet. She turned around eventually, and he was looking at his cup, both hands wrapped around it. And he was very still, the kind of still that a man gets when something has landed somewhere he didn't expect it to land, and he is taking a moment to understand where that is. She didn't say anything else. She'd said what she said. He looked up. "All right," he said. That was all. He stayed another week. Then the week after that, he helped her re-roof the section of the barn that leaked. He was better at roofing than she was, which she told him, and he said he'd done enough of it. She didn't ask when or where. She handed him shingles, and he nailed them, and by the end of the afternoon the barn was sound. She did not ask herself what this was. She was 52 years old, and she had been married for 21 years and widowed for 15 months, and she was not a woman who needed to name things in order to tolerate them. Some things took time to be what they were going to be. Maybe this was one of them. The watch stayed in the stall. She never moved it, and he never moved it, and after a while she forgot about it. And then one morning she walked into the barn for some reason she couldn't remember afterward and happened to see the place where it had been, and it was gone. He'd picked it up. She didn't know when. She didn't ask. She thought about M. Whoever that was, for what it's worth. She thought about what that meant, and about whether you inscribed something on a watch because you meant it or because you weren't sure if you meant it and you wanted to mean it. She decided it didn't matter. Most things that got engraved on things were both. There was a night in the third week when the temperature dropped hard and unexpected, and she woke up to cold and went to the kitchen to bang the stove, and there was already a light in the barn, a lamp, and through the small window. She could see him moving. Tenant Claire probably had gotten up when he felt the cold because a horse with a recently healed leg didn't need a cold night on top of it. She stood and watched the light move in the barn window. She thought about a lot of things while she stood there. About the mortgage she owed the bank that was coming due in September, and that she had no clear plan for paying, though it was only June and she'd think of something she always had. About the Hensley boys who never came. About the north fence she'd done herself, post by post, and which was not pretty but was standing. About the east field drainage that would hold now if the rain came. About bread that came out better when you made more of it. About 2 cups for coffee without thinking. About the gate, the main gate, that swung easy now, that she pushed open every morning without lifting and jerking, and how for a while she hadn't even noticed she'd stopped fighting it. She watched the light in the barn. After a while, she went back to bed. In the morning, he was at the kitchen door before she'd gotten making the coffee, which had not happened before. Usually she had it going by the time he appeared. She said, "Come in," and he came in, and he started the coffee himself, because he'd been here long enough to know where things were, and she sat down at the table and watched him do it. He moved around her kitchen the way he moved around Claire, with attention, with a kind of practical care that had no performance in it. He put the coffee on and turned around and leaned against the counter, and they looked at each other. "September," she said. He looked at her. "There's a mortgage," she said. "September. It's not a small amount." She was looking at the table as she said it. The grain of the wood, the place near the edge where Thomas had notched it slightly with a chisel by accident one time, and she'd never forgotten it. Would always find it with her finger when she sat down. "I'm not telling you because I'm just telling you so you know what you're staying with, if you're staying." He picked up a cup, looked at it, put it down. "All right," he said. "That's it? All right. What do you want me to say?" She thought about it. "Nothing, I suppose." The coffee started to sound the way it sounds when it's almost ready. Outside, a bird was doing something in the cottonwoods. She couldn't tell what. "I wrote a letter once," he said, "that I should have sent." She looked up at him. "What was it about?" she said. He picked up the coffee pot. "Same as most letters," he said. "What I should have said and didn't." He poured her cup first, set it in front of her. She wrapped her hands around it. The warmth came through. "There are things I can tell you about what happened after, and things I can't, because I only know some of it, and some of what I know I'm not entirely certain of. I can tell you that Earl Cutter was still at that property when September came and went. I can tell you the bank got paid, though I don't know the full of how. I can tell you the Hensley boys finally showed up one afternoon, 3 months too late, and there was a man already in the yard when they came, a man who handed them their tools back politely, but very clearly, and they left without argument. I can tell you the mare Claire lived another 4 years, and when she died it was peacefully, as those things go, and that Delia said afterward a horse had the best last years of any horse she'd known. I can tell you there were 2 cups on the table, every morning, set there without thinking. What I can't tell you is what was said and what was not said, and in what order, because those things happen in the privacy of a life that doesn't ask to be witnessed. I think that's right. I think some things are only yours, and anybody who tells you they know exactly how it went is probably telling you the version they need to believe, and not the thing itself. There's a particular quality to the late light in Kansas in October. It comes in low and sideways, and it hits everything at an angle that shows you the texture of things, the grain in wood, the roughness of stone. The way a field after rain will still have a trace of green in it even after most of the year is done. I'm thinking about that light, because when I picture the end of this story, that's what I see. A kitchen, late afternoon. October, probably. 2 people doing ordinary things in the ordinary way of 2 people who have figured out the dimensions of a shared space and have stopped negotiating them. Bread cooling on the counter. The smell of it. And through the window, the east field the one with the drainage now, and beyond at the cottonwoods, and above them that low sideways October light, making everything it touches look like it was always going to end up exactly here. The gate in the yard, standing open, still swinging easy.